Hello listeners, you're listening to 18 Minutes with Satyal and Silwal. I am Satyal.
And I'm Silwal, and we are a weekly podcast from the Himalayas.
It's a Tuesday and it's 7:30. You know, it's time for perspectives, conversations and stories.
We've just concluded National Speaking Championship 2016 where we were judge. We hosted the show, and a big congratulations goes to the winner,
Sadiq
Thapa.
So the first runner-up, Smriti Turadar, and the second runner-up, Malika Matya.
Yeah, so a big congratulations to them. Out of 59 participants, almost 44 came in for the show, and so someone has to win. And these were the three best speakers for the championship. So yes, woo! So Satyal, this is a big day for us because we've just reached 400 subscribers. How does that make you feel, man?
Well, as much as it makes me feel very happy that we are now, I feel like I'm talking to a live audience of 400 people, probably 300 of them are sleeping. Yet still, I still reminisce in the starting days of the podcast when we felt like only if 20 people could listen to it, it would feel so much happier. And now suddenly there's this pressure of being accountable to 400 people, man. So it's a mixed feeling, to be very honest.
I know what you're getting into, because we talk about how we're happy with 100 views and 100 viewers week in, week out, and that's been the norm for the past 7-8 episodes. I don't know what's wrong, but that just happened.
That's our Mac agreeing to what we're saying.
Yeah,
right?
But it hurts us when there's a decrease in a subscriber, right? So,
exactly.
That makes us accountable. And this episode was not supposed to be just the two of us. We were planning to do an episode with someone else, but a bigger media house came in and swooped our guest. And credit goes to her for choosing the right one, I guess, because we're not that famous.
Yeah, that happens, but she'll be back next week, hopefully. But don't you think it's one way the universe is telling us to be humble? Because if you look at our pages on social media, then there's people tagging us saying we did a fantastic job as MCs. We're suddenly this judges in such a big competition, which made me kind of question our own credentials to begin with.
Yeah, I think I want to share this with everyone listening right now. Is when we were asked to judge the show, we actually weren't too excited about judging people because we knew we had to. Who the hell are we to judge people?
And on top of that, we knew that our job was to MC the final. So these particular people who would be judging, we would then be hosting that show for them, and that would in turn mean that we'd be double judged, if that makes sense. And it just made it even more difficult for us to MC. And talking about MCing, people said that they loved the show, but you and I know how impromptu it was. And don't you think we could do good because it was an impromptu session for us and we were just looking to have fun?
I think firstly our dynamics plays off really well. It's very difficult to find a good team to work with, and Maske and Umesh Dai were fantastic for giving us this opportunity and believing in us, and I think we added some value towards it as well. We were playing a character, right? Satya was a different character, Silva was a different character, and somehow that for the entire day went perfectly, I guess.
Absolutely.
Glitches, yes, but
that's even management. But I love how you said character here, because Silva was playing a character, a Silwal character, and I was playing a Satyal character. And to a lot of our new audience will probably be,
expecting entertainment and funny jokes and quips, and me making fun of Satyal hitting me back with snipes at
we do that at times, and it's fun. But a lot of times we are these two sensitive souls who are just trying to find their way.
I know, and basically we're boring people. We're not as entertaining as one might think.
Just trying to think here, because we did it to have fun and we wanted to be part of that larger movement of the National Speaking Championship. Now imagine if suddenly people who looked into our dynamics, and there were some really kind comments were like, there's the best MCs ever, they pulled it off really well, you guys should go into acting because we had that drama and theatrics and everything. Now imagine if a corporate house calls us for their annual day and asks us to host the show, and they're willing to pay us good money. Imagine the amount of pressure that will give us, because here we are just trying to have fun, but then there will be about proving ourselves, and it's a different ballgame altogether. So don't you think it's like being anonymous and just being this beginner mind is such a great thing? It kind of reminds me of that same feeling.
I just want to say, if a big corporation comes in and he's like 10 lakh for the show,
Well, maybe,
think about it.
Maybe.
Think about it. But talking about how it's the beauty of being anonymous, or what's the title? I think.
Yeah, the beauty of being anonymous.
We found out our title.
Yeah.
And trust me, guys, this is as impromptu as we can get.
We are always impromptu. Just like this podcast today, because like Silwal said, it's meant to be something completely different, but still we had to put up a show for you guys. Now that's a pressure in itself, right? You're accountable to 400 people who've subscribed to you. You cannot do a no-show.
And today was the first time in many months that we were actually dumbfounded in what we were going to talk about.
Our pool of topics had dried up.
Yes.
All our topics in the pipeline were with guests, and this is something that we had to think impromptu again.
And I think the hype of National Speaking Championship association with 18 Minutes, somehow we being associated with them and pulling this show off. Suddenly we have a number of new listeners, and now you're not
those two
anonymous.
characters, yeah,
Okay.
and you're not those two characters
Yes.
who have been loved, and you're certainly back to this
boring self, I
boring
guess.
Satyal and Silwal, and now there's this pressure, and now even if one person unsubscribes us, that's going to hurt us, whereas in the beginning we would be happy with 20 people subscribing to us. So it just adds to a lot of pressure, is what we are trying to see here.
I think the pressure comes in not because we're finding it hard, but rather we're finding it difficult because we are accountable. And I think you said that in the beginning as well. So we're accountable to 400 subscribers. Yeah, maybe 150 listeners tune in week out. We have to show or give something of value. And I think when we talk about beauty of being anonymous, I have always had this idea where I would always want to be in the dark rather than be in the spotlight, because being in the spotlight makes me the center of attention, and whatever I do is going to be judged on.
You'll be scrutinized very hard.
Yes, and usually when I'm working in a team as well, when there's a group work involved, I would rather be the man behind it and stay behind the curtains than have that limelight, because see, I'm a mischievous person and I like being mischievous, and suddenly if I'm in this spotlight,
You can't be mischievous
yes,
anymore.
I am responsible, and I am looked up to in some ways on how I am behaving, and that does not really make me comfortable, because that's where my beauty of being anonymous comes into. It's very easy for me. I think I'm taking this chicken way out, where I can sit at the back of the bench and talk about how shit the presenter in front of me is, but flip that, I'm in that stage, or I'm in that position, suddenly eyes are with me, and I have to be mindful of these people looking at me.
Absolutely. There's this few people who are asking me, because there's talk of you going out next year, putting it out there again. That's another pressure, right?
Please don't.
And
this is another pressure.
There are
I don't
like
wanna
a lot of
think about
people,
right now.
because probably they love our show and they're concerned for our show. I've been getting a lot of questions where they've been asking me, what will you do if Silwal leaves? And I've been telling them time and again that it's a podcast. We can always do that through Skype, and how you being in a different country, or probably if I leave, us being in a different country, will further enrich our perspectives and add value to the podcast again. But that's a pressure of its own kind, and sometimes I feel like shit, that is true pressure. That's people asking for answers, whereas when we started out, we were just accountable to the two of us. Now there's this whole community out there watching the things that we are doing, and that's a different ballgame. And to add to that, let's talk about money and how because we've given time and energy and effort into the podcast, now suddenly there's this need to make money out of it. Not for the two of us, but for people looking at us and watching us. Have you been through such experiences where people have actually questioned if you make money out of it and laughed at you for not?
The past 1 month, I've been asked a lot of questions on, what are you actually getting out of the podcast? And I think the credit goes to Satyal when you talked about how 5 years down the line or 10 years down the line, you can just talk to someone and be like, I've been running a podcast for the last 5 years.
Absolutely.
A big claim, I don't know what the future holds. This podcast works for a period of time until it starts feeling like work. So far, we've had this amazing run where each week we're like excited about what we can talk about.
Absolutely.
What value we can give to, and sometimes the fear comes when we are scared of can we not give any value to our listener. And right now this feels like the two of us ranting on about how we're getting a bit of fame and all these things. But think about you yourself in this situation where you're a nobody in some sense, and now you're somebody.
Apparently you're somebody.
Apparently you're somebody, right? What are the things that you can do? What are the things you cannot do? And there's so many things, but taking it as easy as I can, it does not really matter.
Nobody cares, go harder.
Yeah.
Because
amazing line.
I kind of feel like we are in this state because we never did this for fame. If we are on the path to fame, then probably either we'd be happy that we're on our way to 10,000 subscribers, or sad that we just have 400. Here, it's just a flip side to it. It's a completely different ballgame, different outlook on how we are like accountable to all these people out here. It's great if you can find value out of it, but when you're asked questions like money, not just money, there have been a lot of other questions like why don't you tie up with a radio station? Why don't you cater to a larger audience? As if 400 isn't big enough.
Big number, right?
Big number already.
I want to talk about. I read this article some time ago on how you cannot focus on goals, but focus on the process itself.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say we started this podcast with this goal of having, let's say, 1,000 subscribers by the end of the year.
Mm-hmm.
We would always be scared and worried and in this pressure to deliver 1,000 subscribers.
True.
But it is the process. We started out with 10, 20, 50, 70, now 400, and this is an amazing ride. And every day a new subscriber subscribes to our YouTube channel. This is a bonus.
Absolutely. An audio thing on YouTube.
Yes,
How stupid is that?
How stupid are we to have an audio podcast on a video, sharing platform?
Mm-hmm.
But this has never been about gaining that
fame or money.
Because at the end of the day, even if no one listens to us, we would still do this.
Yeah, absolutely. It reminds me of the time when we were at the Creativeness Fest, and that was a big moment for us because we had to sit down and think about the future of our podcast. And do you remember that conversation we had with Pat Devley, where he said he has a fantastic TED talk, by the way, go check that out. He's a friend of ours, proud to call him a friend. He talked about how we should never be focusing on the views or the subscriber base, but should be continuing this as long as we have fun.
And I think credit goes to him for turning to us towards being a weekly podcast.
Yeah.
Because prior to our 5th episode, prior to Creativeness Fest, we were doing it once every 2 weeks.
It's a fortnightly podcast, and we turned it around. And we've been having fun ever since. So I think it just goes on to show how a value-driven mission is probably very important, because at the end of the day, even if when people are questioning you, you're having that self-doubt, that value is driving you towards something that you began initially. And I think that's very important.
I don't know where we've been heading towards in this podcast, but I talked about how I like to be in the dark and not being famous or being known.
Mm-hmm.
And I like the anonymity that there is when I am in that behind the curtain. What do you feel about being anonymous, the beauty of it?
I think it's beautiful, because we're definitely doing a podcast episode on this one. But the thing is, you need to balance things out. There are times when I don't want to use Facebook at all, but when it's a Tuesday and it's 7:30, it's time for perspectives, conversations, and stories. And you're somewhere, I'm somewhere, and usually I take up that responsibility of putting it out there, right? So, and whenever you're going out, so tomorrow I have a presentation with a new audience, so I'll definitely talk about the podcast. And
Yes.
it's not much of a marketing thing, but you never know who's going to find value out of it and who resonates with the value that you're driving. So, I just know that at the back of my mind, I'm not doing it for popularity. But then again, if I don't talk about my creations, who will? That's another question, because you remember at the Creativeness Fest where there were a few eyebrows raised and people were asking us why we're talking about our podcast, and we said, duh, because it's our podcast. That's why we're talking about our podcast. So I think it's a balance thing, but I definitely agree with a lot of things that you said. And I don't think we could have come this far if we both weren't aligned with the same values of not doing it for fame or money, or just doing it because we want to improve our speaking. And if I can just go back to this episode and listen, I think we've come a long way in terms of how improved we have been in terms of speaking, and that's it is for us.
And that's how we started. That's how we really started. We wanted to improve our speaking, and by the end of this run that we are in, I think we'll be decent speakers.
Absolutely. And talking about impromptu, this podcast, because it was the last ditch plan, it is impromptu. The National Speaking Championship was a lot to do with being impromptu. I'm sorry.
Apart from the intro.
But a lot of that, we the lines and everything were not very scripted. There's just a basic sense of direction, but I think we've shown remarkable improvement. I'm not trying to boast here, but from deep inside, you've improved and I've improved, and as long as we can communicate this with people, fine. But if they don't understand, I don't think they need to understand, because nobody cares go harder. So I think that is how we should go ahead.
Just summing everything up, we are not in cloud 9 and flying over this idea that we are somehow bigger than we were before.
Absolutely.
We were still the same. We are still the same. We will still be the same.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, some people will love us for it. Some people will hate us for it. But at the end of the day, our feet are still in the ground. And
yeah, and even if either one of us tries to fly too high, the other will bring the other person down.
Yes.
Because either we both fly or none of us fly. I think that's something that we have made very clear to ourselves. And just bring in Animesh here, because that guy has been doing fantastic job helping us out, but he never wants that limelight, and he's the same like us.
I know. Animax, you're listening to us right now because you're probably editing this, and we've talked about how we would want the three of us to be on a show and just have this real conversation, because even though our names are on the title of it, you are the heart and soul of the
Absolutely.
podcast.
18 minutes would not be 18
Yes.
minutes without Amax.
And
period.
And it's always the two of us on this voice, right? And it always feels like there is this one person, the 33% of the entire podcast is still behind the scenes, and he's working. And the beauty of being anonymous, he personifies the beauty of being anonymous, because
exactly.
he's always there. And this is me praising him, and this is Satyal and I just being humble enough to have found Animesh to actually be our friend and believed in us.
Absolutely.
In this journey.
So yeah, listeners, with this episode, we're just trying to tell you that even because we're giving our example now, and because the National Speaking Championship happened and there's been a little bit of hype around how we did a great job and everything, but if you're someone out there who also thinks that maybe a little bit of fame will do good to you, maybe it will, but chances are maybe it won't, and you'll be in that situation.
Fame is not a bad thing, and fame is actually a good thing. People knowing you is actually a very good thing.
For the right reasons,
For the right reasons, right? But good publicity is good publicity. Regardless, you have to be grounded in some ways. I think the takeaway for this episode, the value that is in this episode is, don't think too much about yourself. Sometimes it is amongst us, we are too harsh on ourselves, but there's this fine balance between being too harsh or it's just the perfect one. And
just to cap it off, I think fame should always be a byproduct of the good work that you do and not an end goal in itself.
Satyal is on fire. I am out of words today.
Alright, listeners, so we'll be back again next Tuesday at 7:30 p.m. on YouTube and on SoundCloud. And one last thing,
it's never too late to start.